Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm your host, Austin Hare, and today we have Keith Miller on the line. Keith is CEO of Partnerships for Dentists, aka P4D, and they were founded in 2017 and they are already up to 24 locations throughout 5 states. So, Keith, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. How's it going today, my man?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Great. So, you guys are in Dallas, Texas, I know, and you've done a great job at scaling, but obviously it didn't happen overnight. It takes time. So I'm curious to hear more of your story. I want to know more about Keith and who is he? So what was it like when you were growing up as a kid? Like, did you know from an early age you wanted to be have a DSO with, over 20 locations?
No, that was the last thing in my mind. As a kid, we grew up in northeastern Ohio, just outside a small little community outside of Akron. So it was kind of sheltered, truthfully. That I didn't really get to see the world until later in life. I think I took my first airplane ride when I was 22. Uh,
Wow.
so I really hadn't seen a lot or done a lot, but growing up, I was always interested in doing like entrepreneurial type of things. I had a paper route. I used to steal my dad's golf balls and walk around the neighborhood and sell them door to door to
That's
guys.
funny. I used to do something very similar to that. We would fish them out of the woods and the ponds at the golf course by my house.
I did that too. I did that too.
What age was that?
Oh, I was probably eight,
Nice.
something like that. We used to go to Florida like every couple of years, and I used to collect seashells on the beach. And when I'd come back, I'd set up a little stand and sell seashells. So, it
100%
was
margin, right?
yeah, 100%. Just my labor was involved. So I've always had that. I like the art of the deal, so to speak, and
Mm.
trading. And I was always trading things. Trading matchbox cars for bikes. I was always one upping, and my mom and dad would always, wonder where in the world all this new stuff was coming in when I didn't have any money.
Nice.
Or I'd go through people's trash cans on the way home from school and find stuff that looked valuable and then sell it to
Wow.
somebody that thought it was valuable. So there was always something there for me to, try to make something happen.
Wow, that's cool. So that kind of gave you an inclination, like, hey, you like doing entrepreneurial things, you like making money, you have a knack for it. And then did you continue this type of stuff throughout high school and into college or what?
Well, high school, I think I just had, I did construction jobs, things that helped me just to make money. I worked in a warehouse. I delivered like doors at a place called Doors Incorporated. So, I don't think it was anything special. Oh, one thing I did, which was really unique, was sell door to door vacuums.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
well, one year in college, I didn't have a job, and I was really stressed because I had to pay for my college, and the only thing that was available was selling vacuums. So I ended up doing that for summer. I made more money than I've ever made. I made like $20,000 that summer,
Wow.
and I ended up because they had shampooers that they wanted me to sell shampooers along with vacuums, but you were allowed to use them as well. So I got a contract with a school district, and I shampooed all their carpets in the summer, and I
Wow.
made a significant amount of money. So that was a pretty cool deal, and I actually learned a ton about sales, because when you end up knocking on people's doors and doing crazy things like that you just see a lot of things that you never knew existed, and you learn a lot about people. And I think any business, the people side of it is the absolute most important to be able to relate with people, motivate people, get people to believe in what the direction that you want to head, and those type of things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think we're always selling something, right? Like people who say they're disinclined to do sales or whatever, like, you're selling your kids on why it's good to go to bed on time, right? Or you're
Yeah.
selling your wife on why it was a good idea to marry you. You know what I mean? And there's always a form, it's just a form of persuasion, really. And I think the better you get at that, not in a manipulative way, just in a factual way, the better you get at that, the more it's going to help you in every facet of your life.
And it's funny you say that. I have two kids in college. One in his last year and one is in his sophomore year. And he sent me a text the other day. He's like, "Hey, they're making me choose a major. What do I do?" He goes, "Here are my choices." He goes, "I'm thinking finance." And I said, "Well, Dawson," I said, "Do you love numbers and do you want to sit behind a computer all day?" Because finance is has to do a lot with numbers, and Is that something I He goes, no, not really. And I said, well, then finance probably isn't the right direction. I said, you should have a good background in numbers and finance, but if you want to be more in a people oriented things, you need to look at different majors like marketing or management or entrepreneurial or something. So we just had that same question. I said, sales are so important because it has to be like just direct sales, but you're exactly right that you're always selling, and you're selling yourself, you're selling your ideas, you're selling concepts. It's if you don't know how to do that or do well, life becomes difficult because ultimately you have to sell yourself to people for various reasons.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100% true. I think it's Darren Hardy. You pointed out to me in one of his podcasters, his videos, but it's like the same thing. Like, yeah, you're always selling something, and to be adverse to it, you're just deceiving yourself, right? I mean, you don't have to go into full-time sales as your job, but to not learn that skill, I mean, you're doing yourself a disservice by doing that. So yeah, I agree 100%. Well, that's cool. And so, okay, I know that you were with Dental One Partners for a long time. Was that kind of like your springboard into the dental industry?
Yeah, I joined Dental One in 2002, and I'd never been in the dental industry. I actually started my career right out of college with Aldi. So I'm not. Are you aware of Aldi Foods?
Yeah, no, actually, I feel like they're a really underrated store. I mean, they have like such great prices for all their stuff, and like nobody talks about it, but we have a ton of them here in Orlando.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's I started with them in 1991,
Wow.
and they had a very unique program. They hired you right out of school at middle management. So I ended up when I graduated, I came into Aldi as a district manager, which was very bizarre because I had no experience in doing that
Right.
in groceries. So they put you through a year-long training program. It was very difficult. Probably worked 70, 80 hours a week. I remember I lost 25 pounds because
Wow.
I never had time to eat. But I learned a ton, and it was a very simple organization that kept things very simple. They didn't complicate things. It was ultimately you were judged on your sales growth and your inventory loss. It was those two things. Sales growth, I guess they called it productivity too. So your sales divided by the man hours you used, which was a productivity number. And so that was one key statistic, and your inventory loss, how much money you lost on theft and breakage and things like that. So they made the business so simple that you could hire anyone and teach them that. So I learned a lot about how to work with people, how to understand business, and how to simplify business so people can understand it to be able to exceed. And so I moved on from Aldi and I came to Dallas in 2000 and actually 2000, and I started a company up that was similar to Aldi. That lasted like 2 years. We opened up 22 stores in 2 years, but the parent company who was the sponsor, it was a really bizarre thing that happened that they were a $22 billion company who their major customer was Kmart, and Kmart went bankrupt.
Wow.
And like subsequently in 3 months, this $22 billion company went bankrupt. It was just crazy. So obviously they didn't have much of a need for in bankruptcy 22 brand new grocery store. So
Hmm.
I just fell into the dental industry. But having the background I had with Aldi and having actually done a startup there in the grocery gave me a good foundation to say I don't really need to know dental. I need to learn dental, but I need to know processes and people and the product. And those three P's are so important. And I think that was one of those things that helped really make a difference. And at that time, the company was not doing very well when I arrived, and really had to do a lot of things to get the right people in the right position, make sure people understood the business, and then had accountability on results. And from that, we really the team did a fantastic job on turning the company around. We ended up growing significantly. And then in 2009, we actually sold the company to MSD Capital, which was Michael Dell's private equity company.
Oh, interesting.
So it was a really good story. And then we ended up growing significantly after that. So I think at the beginning when I joined, it was like 20 locations. When I left, it was north of 150. So a
Wow.
really cool journey in dental, and a really good learning, because during that time, the industry changed significantly. You didn't have a lot of people doing the dental service organizations. And today you have over 1,400 of them. So
Mm.
got to see a lot, got to make a ton of mistakes. I got to learn
Well,
a
that,
lot from
yeah, it
those.
sounds like a great time to be in that, right? Like if it was right for the plucking, right? Like back when you
Yeah,
got started.
absolutely. It was,
Yeah.
but we didn't know what we didn't know.
Mm.
There was no rule book. It was like, you had to face down every challenge like a new challenge, because there just wasn't people doing this. Now, the medical field had done that. You saw medical doing a lot of consolidations and group practices and things, but the dental hadn't got there. So it was a really fun time to be in the business. And, a lot of it was you kind of made it up as it went along. Some of your ideas worked, some wouldn't work. And you just had to course correct when you didn't do the right things.
Mm. Yeah. So what percentage was new de novo locations versus existing, like acquiring existing offices?
We kind of built the company on acquisition, and then during like the mid 2000s, we shifted to de novo.
Mm.
So it was, I think it was just good timing that people were really showing that de novo practice, you can get it up and running, profitable pretty quick. There was a lot of good real estate available. So we did make that transition. We did very well with it. But subsequently today, with P4D, we do all acquisition.
Mm.
So I think the market conditions have changed significantly. That there's a lot of big DSOs that have grown significantly, and you probably know them, but they're on every corner, and they
Yeah.
have a real estate. They've done a fantastic job on their real estate strategy, and they spent a lot of money getting the right position. So I really feel like the best way to grow today is really looking at acquisitions. And we truthfully, we look at, our strategy is a little different what it was back in than one, that we liked finding practices that we thought were broken, and we wanted to be able to buy them really inexpensively and then be able to build them up and get good returns. And today, we have a different thought process that, we're really focused on having excellent dentists. So we're looking at practices that are extremely successful, 2 doctor practices. The doctors have done an amazing job on building their business. And then we can come in and help them continue to grow. That's really what our place in all of this is giving great services to be able to help the doctor take it to the next level.
Mm. That's cool. And so when you say extremely successful, I mean, what kind of parameters are you looking for? What metrics?
2 doctor practices. I think most of the practices that we're looking at today do 1.7, 1.8 million in collections per year. A good track record. So they've had a good, track record of being able to take care of patients, have a good new patient flow, getting a lot of referrals from new patients.
Mm.
So, there's just so many dentists out there that have done, just a fantastic job on their own building their business. And, that we've partnered with a couple of dentists that have had, $5-6 million practices, which
Wow.
in our industry, those are really, really big
Yeah,
practices.
that's huge.
40 some employees. So these doctors have just hit the ball out of the park and did an amazing job. And we love to be able to get in those situations where we can take some of that burden off their shoulders and stress, and have to worry about every single detail, and allow them to concentrate on just continue to grow and help take care of patients.
Now, did you ever go after the doctors when you first got started back in 2017 with P4D? Were you ever going after a lower revenue generators, or did you always know from day one that like you were going to go after that sort of niche of doctors and locations in that higher performance category?
No, Dental One, we had a lot of single doctor practices. I would say that was probably a majority of what we had. And I've been in operations my whole life, and in this business, it's the way that you have to manage, right? So the way that you have to help with, managing and leading some of these practices, it takes just as much effort to help manage a 1 doctor practice versus a 5 doctor practice. And so when you're looking at your resources, if you have 5 practices doing $1 million versus 1 practice doing 5 million, that it just makes it a lot easier on our side to provide a lot more services and a lot more impact if we're not spread thinner across the practices. So you have 5 rents, you have 5 doctors, you have 5 staffs, 5 sets of equipment, And it just the business model for us and the way that we like to do things, that having bigger practices has really been our niche. And I always look at how we do, as I keep a scorecard on us, and basically say how much have we helped the doctor after we've partnered with them. And I would call this post or pre-pandemic, that our yearly average of partnership, that we help the doctor grow their practice about 8% in revenues, but really an amazingly 58% in EBITDA. So
Wow.
that this value creation that we have, when we do a capital event, that's huge for our doctor partners. And truthfully, that's we're trying to help them with wealth creation. Help them create wealth that they couldn't do on their own because they're associated with a group like us.
Yeah, it's good. And it's interesting, you kind of started with doing the acquisition with Dental One, the acquisition of like lower revenue generating doctors, and then moved up to higher revenue generating doctors, and part of that business, and then as well as your own company with P4D. And it seems like a theme that I've noticed, when just talking to other DSOs and other and that sort of thing, is like you start out with like those. There's been a couple of people who they started out with those, I guess, low hanging fruit, if you will, right? It's like the underperforming doctors, underperforming locations, where it's like, hey, I know if I go in and have these strategies, bam. But then you get to a point where it's like, okay, like you said, well, there's only so much upside, right? I'm putting in a lot of effort here. So what if we just go after like a little bit more successful, maybe not quite in the range you're going for, but somewhere between. And then like the third step is almost like you get to a point where you feel like you've acquired all of the people in your area who are going to be acquired. And then it's like, now it's a combination of like, okay, we can only grow so fast for acquisition. Now we're going to have to add at least a couple de novos to our strategy. And it seems like there's like a consistent kind of theme of like moving your way, through the timeline in that sense. And so, but it sounds like you guys still have a lot of room in acquisitions before you have to really consider a strong de novo approach.
Yeah, I really do. And it's all about where do you want to place your effort. And I truly believe, that we really focus on hiring great people. And I like we started the conversation, it's all about people, having great people around you. I feel like I probably spend on my team more than most DSOs do, because I really focus on people that have kind of been there and done that. That people that have a great track record, people that have succeeded in this industry. So I'm willing to pay more than most people are, because when we can get those type of results, we're working with our partners, you really have to have great people on your team to be able to get that. So that happens to be our strategy. And that if you're another DSO, that there are a couple of DSOs, all they do is de novos, like Aspen and Pacific, like they do a fantastic job on real estate. They're A+ on real estate companies. They find fantastic locations, best of the best, and they know how to execute that. But they probably aren't going to go into a acquisition strategy, because that just isn't their model. But then there are other companies like Heartland that they've predominantly for the years they've done acquisitions, and they've blended in de novos over time. So I think only time will tell that this happens to be today where our focus is, and we're doing really well with it, and our partners are very happy, and we're able to give them really good returns on their time that they're spending with us. So we're not going to deviate that and kind of direct or divert our focus unless there's some reason that causes us to want to change that model.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense 100%. And so you were talking about how you spend a lot of time with your staff now. And I know in the past we talked about servant leadership and how you feel really strongly about that. So what does that mean to you, and how do you implement that?
Well, I was introduced to a book that I think kind of changed my life. It was called The Servant from James Hunter. And it was one of those things that I've been to so many seminars, I've read so many books, good to great. So I've done all this stuff, but I was always felt like it was too complicated, right? Like it's always step 1 through 9, and it's all of these blocking and tackling. You do this, this will happen, but ultimately it's hard to keep people's attention. If you're going to ask them to read a book this big and take away strategies, you usually take away one thing or two things that somebody might capture. And so when I read this book, and it has nothing to do with business. It's about life, really. It's a journey
Hmm.
that this guy happens to be in a point of life that everything seems to be failing for him: his job, his wife, his kids, and he goes to a monastery, and he gets this monastery. He's with a collection of different people and personalities, and they do a very good job of just telling a story about how this guy is interacting with, one of the guys' name is the sergeant. So he has this very strong A-type personality, and another is a teacher, and another is a coach. So you have all of these different personality types that at first he bristled to want to have diversity, right? It's like my way, the way I think I'm right, you're wrong. And then they move through this whole journey in this monastery with this teacher called Simeon. And at the end of the day, it really teaches you in a short period of time how important it is to have diversity on your team. And it's not all about to get people on the team that think just like you, but it's how to respect others for their opinions and how they think, and accept that rather than push it away. And it's all about it's things that we've all learned as kids that we've all completely forgotten as adults, and doing and respecting others and listening to people, and you know doing what's the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. All those really really basic concepts that just so many people miss today. But what I found is really getting people to read that book, understanding this journey, they relate to it. And I can say over all the years that I've used it as a tool that I can't tell you how many people that have come back to me 10 years later and said, they ping me on LinkedIn or Facebook or something and they say, hey, I just want to let you know, when you did that seminar back in 2003 on servant leadership, it changed my life, and, it changed my marriage and the way that I do things with my kids. And I can't tell you how much I can appreciate for you introducing me to that book. So that the servant leadership, it can mean a lot of different things, a lot of mean people, but it goes down to you treat people like you want to be treated.
Wow.
And it's just a really cool thing, and it's an easy way to get people to understand it, because it is just the book is probably a 4-hour read at most. I listen to it still on my on iTunes, so
Oh, nice.
I don't have a lot of time to read, but books, but I do listen to them, and it just
Same
keeps
here.
reminding me of all these little things that, if we want to be successful in life, in our communities and our families and work, all those things, a lot of things that you have to do is really work on yourself. And that a lot of people have to blame others for their failures or their downfalls, but truly, if you can challenge yourself to be great and understanding people and how to work with people, that's to me, that's the end game on prosperity is being happy in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does that look like in practicality in terms of like when you come into conflict with somebody on, your staff or your leadership team or something like that? Like how do you exemplify servant leadership while, disagreeing?
Well, I think, and everyone is a little different. For me personally, I always like to switch the tables. My little secret is, I'll run through everything in my head first, and I'll say, okay, if I were not doing things right, or if I needed to be coached to be better, what words and what actions would need to take place to motivate me to do that rather than ticking me off? And I think that's the balance that, people take things so personally, and there are a lot of people that aren't willing and open to hear constructive criticism. And so the delivery method on how you say that is so, so important, that you don't demotivate people instead of motivating them to do better. So I constantly just, I'm always thinking about the verbiage I use, and how I talk to people, and how can I use my personal influence to help change them for the positive, even though I have to say some things that probably won't feel very
Hmm. Yeah. So it's like the wrapper that you deliver the contents in is really important to you.
good. Yeah, it truly is. And there's so many ways that you can get people to where they need to be, but they have to allow themselves to get there. So I've just seen so many mistakes, and even by myself, I've made plenty of them. But if you can deliver content to somebody in a way that they can accept it and they'll take it and make changes because of it, everyone wins. And the mistake people make is that they have it on their checklist, right? I need to talk to Austin about his performance. So I'm going to call him up and say, hey, Austin, you screwed this up. Don't do it again. We're not going to tolerate this. You're going to be fired. So, I mean, people want to get things done and they want to get off their list and they don't put enough time in to say, how do I do this right to get them to be able to change? And I think that's a huge opportunity for most people in leadership, that they don't think enough about their I guess their role in helping people succeed.
That's good. Yeah, I agree with that too. So, in between Dental One and starting P4D, you were president at Legacy ER and Urgent Care. So how did that happen and what was that like?
Well, I had an opportunity. I had met some people, and there was a kind of a brand new company starting up in Plano. They had 2 locations, and it was a brand new concept. So in Texas, they had passed some laws that allowed emergency rooms to come out of the hospital and to operate, being non-doctor owned. And this company had started 2 of these. Now, the unique part is, if you go to an emergency room, I don't know if you ever had to do this, but typically you walk out with a really big bill. So It doesn't matter if you go in with a sore throat or stitches or a sprained ankle, you get a $2,400 bill. And that's the bad part about emergency rooms. So the consumer was very, very confused. What's the difference between an emergency room and a urgent care and all these other private care physicians and so forth. And so the concept that they had built, which was just fantastic, is they combined an emergency room and an urgent care together and only billed the patient for the level of care they needed. So the facilities were open 24/7. They would actually have hours, like for the urgent care, from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. So if someone had to come in for a true emergency in the middle of the night, it would be billed as emergency because it's like a hospital emergency room. But if anyone came in between the hours of 7 and 9, that they would only be billed for the level of care they needed. So if they're having a heart attack, yes, they would get billed for the emergency. If they came in for a sprained ankle, they'd get billed for an urgent care. And truly the difference in cost, from what I remember, the urgent care bill was like $220, and then the emergency bill was $2,400. So
wow.
Just a fantastic concept. I really thought it was cool. I joined them in 2015, and we grew the company from 15 to 17, from 2 locations to 6. And then it so happened that my non-compete was up with my former company because I couldn't do dental for 2 years. And then I met the owner of Encore Enterprises, who's Dr. Bharat Sagani, who's a cardiologist, and he wanted to do dental, and just kind of an opportunity I couldn't refuse. And I wanted to be able to take my talents that I'd learned for all those years and put them in place and do something really special that I thought we could carve a niche in dental that no one had really done before. And so that was kind of the path. I still love those guys at Legacy. They're an amazing team, and they've done amazing since I left.
That's cool. Were you able to keep any shares when you moved over?
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. That's great. So participate in the upside, hopefully still. Yeah. So, between all your experience, Dental One, Legacy, ER, Urgent Care, P4D, what kind of trends do you notice in the real estate? Like, how important is site selection? And, is that ever a deal breaker for you when you're looking at acquiring a new office?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. And especially in a de novo strategy, like that's it, right? Like either you have a top space, highly visible, high traffic, predominantly versus, in the same center as a Walmart or some big Target or grocery store, something that creates drive-by traffic. And new patients is what's so important in de novos. Like you have to get new customers. So in de novos, typically you get 25 to 35% of your new patients come from drive-by. And so if you don't have a good access to, to have a good real estate, then you're going to tank your business. So I would say that's very, very important. In my world, we're buying on performance history. So we're usually buying a business that's been in business for 15 or 20 years. So they have a very built-in, new patient flow and existing patient flow and so forth. So it's not as critical, but I will say that most of these practices are very successful in great real estate. So it's kind of the opposite thing. It doesn't make my mind up to do or not to do, because it's really the history of the performance of the
Yeah.
practice. But conversely, when you look at it, these bigger practices have their own buildings. They've built their own buildings. They've been in great areas. They have great visibility, ease to traffic, and so forth. So it's kind of the opposite. But the doctors did a really good job in selecting the real estate in the first place, which
Right.
allowed the business to do what they did.
Yeah, that process has already been vied because they would never even pop up on your radar probably if they had a bad location.
Yeah, and if you think about medical in general, in the history that you used to only see dentists and doctors in like an office building, right? They'd be stuck on the first to fifth floor of an office building, and there'd be 7 or 8 of them in that same place. And you'd walk down the hall and you see 5 different dentists. Which one am I going to? But nowadays, it's that's all come out of office buildings. Unless they're really old offices, very rarely do you see those in that type of complex. That you're seeing more and more want to be of a retail strategy. And I think all of medicine has changed. And even when I started in dental, like marketing was kind of a new thing. Like it was
Mm.
really, I would say that marketing for dental in the beginning was taboo. Like it was heresy to market your business. You should be good enough that people should just find you, want to see you. And if you had a listing in Yellow Pages, that should be good enough. But competition breeds breeds achievement, and over the years, marketing has become a huge part of all dental practices and dental service organizations.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy to even think about at this stage, right? Like think about a business. I mean, I get it that it's healthcare. And so the premise is like, well, you should be wanting to help people because it's about their health. And while all that's true, that doesn't negate the fact that you still need to do marketing to, stay in business. I mean, it's like you said, it's very, very competitive these days. And I mean, it's mind blowing even thinking about the fact that that was a stigma at one point in time. But so now when you're looking at these new acquisitions, how often do the doctors own the real estate, and how often does that affect the strategy of acquiring them?
So I would say it's probably 75% of the practices that we partner with, the doctor owns the real estate, and we don't buy the real estate. We only participate with them in the dental practice. So I would say almost in all cases that they keep the real estate as an investment. Now, over time, they may want to sell that to a different investor as an investment strategy, depending where they are in life and what they want to do. But I think most dentists are coached early on from their accountants for tax reasons, that don't rent and don't pay rent to someone else when, you're going to be in this business for 15, 20, 30 years. You might as well own that real estate. And so it kind of goes hand in hand that the doctor owns that real estate, and they continue to do it in almost all cases when they join us.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because we're very situational in our approach and how we coach people, because we get asked that question a lot, like, hey, should we buy or rent our location? A lot of times the answer though is no, you shouldn't buy it. And the factors are where is it located? Like we look at it from a really ideal level lens. Like where is the place that you need to be? Where's the best spot you possibly need to be? You need to be there, regardless of if you have to rent or if you have to buy. You need to be there, right? Then secondarily, okay, everything's equal. One's available for rent in the perfect spot. One's available to buy. Well, then the question is, what are your goals? What are you going to do with that capital? Because if you put down a 25% down payment on a commercial real estate building, you have less capital to grow your business. Are you planning on scaling? Are you planning on opening multiple locations? If the answer is no, you want to do a single one, you want to have safety in your retirement, then great. Then that's usually the case where it's like, okay, yeah, buy your real estate if you're sure you're going to be here. But the caution still is the fact that you might think you're diversified because you got real estate, right? You own real estate and you have your business, but the value of that real estate is tied directly to your business if you're a single tenant operator, because it's all based on the strength of the tenant and the length of the lease. And so if you're signing that to yourself, sure, you got an asset, but if you got a business, it's not going to be, that asset's not going to be worth anywhere near as much as it is as having a full strong credited lease sign. And so sometimes what we coach people do is like, hey, you want to own real estate, you want to diversify, good. It doesn't have to be your own building, right? Like you can own the building of other tenants, of other businesses, and that will actually help create more diversification. But it's not an easy thing, right? You got to really think through what your long-term plans are. And it's going to be different for every single person. So it's interesting that 75% of them own the real estate in your situation. Do they?
But you got to remember that these practices, a lot have been around for 15 or 20 years.
Mm,
So, I think the approach that you're taking is absolutely right. But, 15 or 20 years ago, all those other options weren't, all on the table like they are
before
today.
the age of the DSO, you mean?
Yes. So
Yeah.
I do think that the change in times, that today that's a perfect strategy with the market conditions. But back then it was kind of like they might have
Right.
been the dentist in town and they had this great plot of land that was right in across from the post office, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And that's why, that we're not buying in most cases that, dentists that have just
Mm,
opened a business in the last 5 years. So
yeah.
I
And they
think
did it.
yeah, your strategy is perfect for today. That's
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
A
sometimes the
lot
answer
of these
is
people are
is
getting,
is
yeah, they're
still to
getting,
buy it.
getting advice 20 years ago or 25
Right,
years
right.
ago.
Yo, well, even still today, the answer sometimes is buy it. You know what I mean? Like you're better off buying it for yourself because you do have some control. That's another positive about buying it. You got 100% control, right? No landlord can tell you no or anything like that. So it really just depends. How often when you're acquiring these locations are they trying to sell their real estate at the same time, or is that very rare? They're mostly trying to hold on to it.
No, I haven't had one. I haven't had one to do. Now there
Yes.
have been, I think, two out of all of ours. That's a couple years down the road. If they're getting closer to retirement, they're trying to get their assets kind of online. They've looked and sold their properties, but I think that's the rarity. A lot of them, I think, like getting rent checks and
Yeah.
the tax advantages that they have with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So, geographically, what's your strategy moving forward? Are you targeting any areas, any states, more or less than other areas? Because you got
Uh,
5 states right now, which is pretty well diversified.
Yeah, that truthfully, the way that I look at it, that I have such good people and such a good team that are willing to travel, that I just want to find great doctors and great practices. And I mean, I think there are a few areas in the country that aren't, the best place to do business for DSOs, and probably avoid those. But um, the ultimate thing is if we can find the right dentist with a great practice and done a great job, that it really doesn't matter where they are, what state it happens to be in, if it's in Alaska or if it's in Florida or even in New Mexico. But right now we have um, I guess 6 locations in New Mexico. So
Mm,
it's all about the right people and the right practices. So I'm kind of like, if it happens to be in Ohio, then we'll go to Ohio. If it
mm.
happens to be in Georgia, we'll go to Georgia. So it's all going to come down that we just want great practices and great people. And if we find that, then we'll find a way to help them operate in those areas.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So what's kind of like your long-term goals, like your 5 or 10-year goals for P4D or for yourself personally?
Well, I mean, I truly like the way that we look at it is, I don't even say, hey, I want to open up 25 next year and I want to open up 100 by that isn't my focus. Now that could be the outcome, but it's all about how many great practices we can find, truthfully. We have a short-term goal that we wanted to get to 100 million in revenues and then recapitalize to help, get monies out to our partners, because our partners are actually owners in the business with us. So, we hope that happens within the next year. Very, very likely we're going to be there. So that will be a great thing to distribute money to our partners and also the investors in the company. And then, the goal, and I think in all the DSOs, is to do that every 4 to 5 years. Continually return monies to the investors in the company. And if that means that I can do 20 in a year, then I do 20 a year. But if I can only find 10, I can find 10. And I think that's the great thing in the autonomy I have, at least today, is I'm not pressured just to do, just to add more and add more. And I think that I've seen a lot in my history in the dental field that a lot of companies have got themselves in trouble when they've just, wanted to be in the game of adding practices, and they're tied to goals of they have to do a certain amount of practices, but then they turn around and they don't have very good practices and they're hard to manage and they're hard to hit results. So I'm much more focused on, kind of creating that level of excellence and keeping with very good practices that Our practices today, as a combined, is about 27% EBITDA and
Nice.
practice level, and our industry is about at 19%. So it's very important that I continue to keep that level of excellence up, that we can have practices that generate that much cash and really give returns to the doctors back by achieving those good results.
Yeah. Okay. And so can you explain kind of like in detail what that process looks like if you are partnering with a doctor? And I know you said that they can participate 100% when they recapitalize. So can you kind of spell that out for us?
Yeah. So in the normal case, what we do is we'll buy a certain percentage of the practice from the doctor. So it has ranged from 90% to 70%. And typically we don't like to go any less than 70 because, we want to make this a good use of our time as well.
Yeah.
So in that case, that we'll let them take 70% of the chips off the table. They're still 30% owners. We give quarterly distributions. So every quarter, whatever cash is left over, that we distribute that to the partners. And then, like I said, every 4 to 5 years, that we'll do some sort of equity event. And we'll have to see what the best route for that is. But it's basically exchanging our equity partners out for new equity partners. And you mentioned this at the beginning, that the industry has done very well. I mean, it's really been a great industry for that. There's been a lot of great companies that have done a lot of great things. So the industry that you could potentially, if you're buying practices, let's just say at an average of 4.5 to 5 times EBITDA, that there is an opportunity, if you do really well, once you've kind of created a company, that you could get anywhere from on the low side 10 times to the high side 15.
Wow.
And so when you put those numbers together, if we're doing business with a doctor and we've both kind of bought into his location or her location at 10 or at 5 times, let's just say, and we get 15 times, that's 10 times their money. And we would say that probably the new investors will have them have to keep some of the equity into the practice, because they don't want everyone just to be cashed out. We don't know what that exactly looks like, but in the history, what I've seen is most doctors have had to keep about half of their equity in every time. So if they own 30%, if they wanted, they could sell 15% and keep 15%. And that really is a good long-term strategy for a doctor, because then they can continue to be an owner. They can continue to get the benefits of ownership, and then be able to participate in that in the next time. And that's also very good for the investor, because you have a very tied-in partner, that you have a partner very engaged in their business and they're happy there and they're getting good returns. So the mix of that strategy really works well. And our ultimate goal is to help doctors with wealth creation. So we want to take the burdens of ownership off of their plate, and some degree, some want a lot and some want a little, but to help them any way we can. And then secondarily, how do we, from being management and being involved in this the world of money, be able to help them get the best return on their investment? And we really feel that's a great strategy, because most dentists work their entire life, and the cycle of a practice goes like this. And so they work, and then they get tired, and the practice starts doing this, and then they decide to sell down here, where really we would suggest, I would look at selling at your peak. That sell at the best time of your practices, take the chips off the table, allow us to partner with you to keep that strategy going up, rather than let the practice go down and then selling when it's on the downside.
No, that's good. That's good. All right. So for anybody listening, they want to get in touch, they want to either partner or just ask questions or whatever it is where do you recommend them getting in touch, or is there a website or an email address you want to give out?
Yeah, that just, you can go to p4dentists.com, and right there, there's some videos. I explain the business. I've explained what we do, some of the history, and then there's also a little pop-up that if you have any interest, we have a gentleman's named Andy Davis. He's the VP of our acquisitions and development. So they can just type in their name and their address, and he'll contact them right away.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's been great just listening to your story and seeing how you guys do it at P4D. Sounds like you got a really good niche, and sounds like the concept of servant leadership is really helping you grow even faster.
yeah, we're having a lot of fun, and I think we're building something really cool. So we're
Cool.
excited for the next 5 to 10 years and see what we can do with this. But we definitely do feel like the dental business and what we're doing has a huge opportunity.
Great, great. Well, it'd be awesome to schedule a follow up in like a year or so and plug back in and see how you guys are doing.
Absolutely, I'd love
Okay.
to.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for your time today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Austin. Appreciate it.